Welcome to this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. On today's program, we're going to highlight the Suffolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office and also the Victim Witness Unit, which is part of the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and talk about all the great services that they provide for our community here in the city of Suffolk. Stay tuned. Welcome back to On the Scene. We're joined now by Suffolk's Commonwealth's Attorney, C. Phillips Phil Ferguson. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. And of course, let's kick it off and talk about how long have you been Suffolk's Commonwealth's Attorney and kind of what are some of the roles of your office? I mean, people may know you, recognize the name certainly, but what does your office do? And again, your duration here as well.
I've been Commonwealth's Attorney since January 1 of 1978. And prior to that, I was an assistant Commonwealth's Attorney for 3.5 years. So I've spent my entire legal career basically doing this kind of work. The office itself is responsible for prosecuting felony criminal cases. That is the most serious crimes that occur in a city. We handle crimes such as murder, rape, robbery, house burglaries, thefts, all the different types of crimes that can occur in a particular city. And in addition to that, we also handle misdemeanor cases, which are the lesser serious crimes. We handle them if a victim comes in and needs assistance. All they've got to do is request our assistance in misdemeanors because we're not legally required to handle those cases, but we do it as a courtesy to the citizens of Suffolk, that if they need assistance, all they have to do is come to our office, ask for assistance, and we will provide it. We also prosecute all drunk driving cases. We prosecute domestic violence types of cases, and we prosecute all misdemeanor appeals that go from the lower court up to the circuit court on appeal.
Okay. Now, in addition to prosecuting the felony crimes, again, I know you've initiated some services through your office that certainly are far-reaching within our community. If you could highlight some of those and maybe some of the methodology behind it for the reasoning, because I know over time, certainly, I'm sure your office has developed and grown into offer the services you offer today. Just kind of lay out what some of those, I call them extras, and I don't want to really phrase it like that, but the amenities, I should say, that your office provides for our citizens here in the city of Suffolk.
We have basically right now a community outreach program in Suffolk. In the last year alone, we have reached over 26,000 people in the city just in the last year alone. Of that amount, we have reached about 4,600 young people, that is, people under the age of 18 years. And a lot of times it's very important to try to educate the young people and to try to help prevent crimes. One of the things that I've tried to do, and I believe very strongly, obviously we're responsible and we do prosecute criminal cases, but I also believe that if you educate people and try to prevent crimes from occurring in the first instance, then you can have a more positive impact on your community. Because every crime that is prevented is a crime that, number one, does not occur, and number two, is a situation where you don't have a victim of a crime.
Correct.
So I think prevention and education is very, very important in addition to the prosecution function that we do. In this office, we currently have 15 different programs that we have that range the gamut from gang prevention, education, and intervention, gang violence in that regard. We also do programs on identity theft, which is something that anyone can become the victim of, and we try to educate people so they will not become the victim of those kinds of crimes. We've done crimes, we've gone into school and made presentations on bullying, which is a major issue now, and we have a total of 15. In fact, in the last 2 years, one of the things that we have done, we've created an actual Citizens Academy, and we've had it for 2 years, where citizens come in and they learn all the functions and what goes on in the Suffolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And in addition to that, this past year, we did a forensic camp that involved about 80 students between the ages of 12 and 15, so they could learn how forensic evidence is used, not only and is collected and gathered, but it's also used in the prosecution. And in that regard, we had people that were experts in the collection of forensic evidence, but also prosecutors who explained to the young people how we used it. And rather interestingly, some of those young people, after they attended this program, expressed a strong interest in either being a lawyer or potentially a prosecutor or being involved in forensic evidence in some way. So we view that as an additional educational piece for our young people. And I might add, both of those programs that we do are free. We charge nothing whatsoever, so the citizens can come at no cost to them.
And I think one of the things you mentioned is the impact on youth. And
Yes.
certainly it's not just an education component, because certainly they can take a civics class and maybe learn a little bit about the legal system, but this is where it's actually happening here. And also, it's not only the education, but it's the fact, like you said, you might be planting seeds for a possible career for some of these young people.
Yes.
So I think that's a great way to interact with the community. But the philosophy as far as dealing with the young people, like you said, you want to educate them early on sort of what the process is, and like you said, prevent crimes if at all possible, because that helps kind of not burden the court system with more cases involving youth, but also, again, help the residents so they're not having to deal with possible crimes that are related, correct?
Absolutely. And in that regard, we have several things. We bring in literally hundreds of students every year into the court system. We let them come in and we talk to them a little bit before they actually go into the courtrooms themselves.
Right.
But they get to actually see criminal cases being tried. They get to see people that have been engaged in criminal conduct and what happens to them. So they get to see what occurs
Right.
for someone who does engage in criminal behavior and the consequences of those actions. I think that's a lot better than some of the things one may see on TV, some of which may be accurate, some of which may not.
Correct.
But we try to bring reality to these young people, with our goal being to try to help them better understand what the laws are, to better understand what consequences can occur if one were to engage in criminal misconduct.
Sure.
And in addition to that, our real goal is to try to prevent crimes from occurring. So again, it's a combination of education and prevention, which we take very strongly and we feel is just as much a component of what we ought to be doing as the actual prosecution of the cases.
Well, you mentioned, the fact that maybe they see something on TV and think, well, life doesn't happen in 30 minutes in an hour, that's for sure. But also, I think it's got to definitely be an eye-opening experience to see the law in action, so to speak. The prosecution of these cases, and the fact that these are real people who have committed real crimes and who are facing real consequences as a result, correct?
That is correct. And in fact, that's what we want them to see. Sometimes on TV, be they gangs, be the other things, it can look to some a bit glamorous.
Right.
Well, there's nothing glamorous about it. The reality is, ultimately, particularly in gang-related actions, if one gets involved with those types of activities, they're going to end up in one of three places. They're going to either end up getting seriously hurt, they're going to end up getting killed, or they're going to end up in jail for a long period of time.
Right.
And we try to stress to the young people that, and in fact, one of the things we do as a part of that, every year we go into all of the Suffolk public schools and we actually make a presentation on gangs and the realities of what will occur if one engages in that kind of behavior. And we are able to reach every middle and high school student in the city of Suffolk every year. So just the other day we went and we dealt with 165 students in one day. And so this is the kind of thing from a prevention standpoint that is really helpful, because we can prosecute the gang leaders, but if they're recruiting young people, then they have an endless pipeline of young people. Our view and what we're trying to do is certainly prosecute and take the gang leaders out, but at the same time cut off their supply of new blood, for lack of a better way to put it, or new youth or new young people to bring in. And in order to do that, you have to educate the young people so they understand the realities of what will occur if you become involved in that kind of activity.
Indeed. And of course, unfortunately, when we talk about crime, there's a perpetrator and there's always a victim.
Correct.
And that's certainly a aspect of the situation that your office focuses on with the Victim Witness Unit. If you could talk a little bit about that role, what that unit is, and sort of the role that it plays within your office.
Yes. In Suffolk, we instituted our first Victim Witness Assistance Program back in 1983. At that time, there were actually very few jurisdictions that had victim witness programs, but it was clear to me, and this was not too long after I had come into office, it became obvious to me that crime victims, they had been victimized once, and they did not need to be victimized again by the criminal justice system. They needed to be informed and educated, and they needed to have an experience that caused them as least difficulty as is humanly possible. And so we initiated it then. We had a part-time victim witness director who was also an investigator at that time. Eventually, it became obvious we needed a full-time director, which we have. And now we have 4 people in our victim witness unit, a director, 2 assistant directors, and basically a program assistant. And as a result of that, we deal with hundreds of victims and witnesses every year, but they are provided with all of the things that they are entitled to and should be entitled to as victims, because what you don't want to do is have someone who's been victimized once and now they get victimized a second time.
Correct. And I believe we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back with the director of that unit for you, Diane Bryant. So I have her returning after the break, but I want to thank you again for your time with us today and letting us know again what's happening with the Suffolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office, certainly all the different facets of your department, your division over here, and all the great work you're doing within the community.
Tim, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
Okay, and again, we'll have more on the scene when we return. Welcome back to On the Scene. We're joined now by Diane Bryant, who of course is the director of the Victim Witness Services Program here with the Suffolk Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And Diane, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Talk a little bit about what are some of the intricate services that your unit handles for this office, and really all the outreach programs and the things that you were able to do to kind of make things better for people who unfortunately have been the victim of a crime here in the city of Suffolk.
Sure. Let me begin by saying that there are 4 members of the victim witness staff who provide services and assistance to crime victims and witnesses here in Suffolk. There's myself as the director. We have 2 assistant directors, Sonia Abbott and Allison Van Puren, and then we have a program assistant, Angela Owen.
Okay.
The services that we provide to crime victims and witnesses here in the city of Suffolk are services that are mandated by the Crime Victim and Witness Rights Act, which was enacted back in 1995. That act basically indicated that all victims and witnesses who enter the criminal justice system have certain rights. Number 1 would be that each victim and witness would be treated with dignity, respect, and sensitivity as they go through that process. This act also says, excuse me, that crime victims and witnesses have a right to receive certain services as they go through that system. They have a right to be heard at all critical stages of while they're going through the criminal justice process. Sure. This act also indicates that crime victims have specific rights, and Victim Witness Services is required to assist those victims in receiving those services. Right. Some of them include, for example, protection. Sometimes we have crime victims who need to be separated from their offender as they wait for their case to be called, and we can provide that assistance to them. Right. Protection also includes what we call no contact orders, helping them to fill out the paperwork with the courts so that they have an order of protection against their offender from further contact or acts of violence. Right. Another category of rights that victims have is financial assistance. So many crime victims, because they are a victim of a crime, have some kind of financial loss as a result of that victimization. And what we do is assist them in gathering that information that is necessary for us to present to the court to let the court know what their losses are so that the court can hold the offender accountable for reimbursing them for that loss. Sure. Another right that victims have is the right of notification. And notification for us would be that victims are notified when they do not have to appear in court. And that is something very important for this program, but for this office as well, right. That people don't take off unnecessarily from work if we know in advance that a case is not going to go, because that prohibits them from having to do those kinds of things. Right. But notification also means that we provide them with notice as it relates to the offender's release from custody. testimony. So they have a right to know that, and then we provide that service to them as well. Another category of rights that we have is called victim input. Crime victims have the opportunity to advise the court of the physical, emotional, and financial impact that that particular crime has had on them. And a lot of what we do is assist victims, in preparing those statements for court, and if they choose to testify, to also prepare them for their testimony in terms of what they want the court to know about their victimization. Courtroom assistance for us is being that support that a lot of people think that we do, and we do all day, every day, providing support and assistance to victims and witnesses while they're in court. And lastly, one of the rights that victims have is what we call post-release assistance. And that includes providing them with written information regarding the disposition of their case so that they know what the outcome of their case was.
Now, if someone becomes the victim of a crime, how are they do they reach out to you? Do you reach out to them? How does that process work as far as to connect? Because obviously someone may be a victim of a crime and think that they're isolated and alone and they don't have resources like you're talking about that your unit provides. But how does that connection typically work?
It is actually a collaborative effort. When a victim reports a crime to the Suffolk Police Department, the Suffolk Police Department provides them with information about victim witness services, who they can contact if they need assistance. And sometimes we receive phone calls based upon that connection once they've reported a crime. A lot of the connection with crime victims is based upon when this office is ready to prosecute an offender for a crime that they've committed. And Victim Witness Services works hand in hand with the attorneys that are assigned to handle those cases in terms of preparing those victims and witnesses for court, but also providing that support and assistance that we just talked about earlier.
Now, of course, you noted the fact that certainly becoming the victim of a crime, I mean, that's something no one ever wants to find themselves in that situation. But I guess the best thing that you're able to offer is information and sort of that person that's there to help. You know, and I think the information part of it is, I mean, some of us don't know how the legal system works and sort of how this process is going to unfold, not to mention, as you noted, the rights and the protections that they have as being a victim of a crime. You know, I guess that's probably a starting point for you when we sit down, or you or remember your staff sit down and talk with them, is, you know, here's kind of what's going to happen. And I think that perhaps provides a lot of comfort at that initial stage, doesn't it?
It does. For a lot of people, in particular, and victims, because we work with them day in, day out, a lot of them have never been to court for anything, sometimes not even a traffic ticket. So they don't really know how the process works. And a lot of them use television shows and movies as a starting point of how they think the system is going to work. And so what we try to do is give them a realistic picture of how the process works.
And I think that's the best thing they can have is open and honest information, so they know what's going to be happening and kind of how that process is going to unfold. Again, then that gives them, again, as I said before, a level of comfort, which I think is the first part in sort of recovering if you've been the victim of a crime. Some level, correct?
I agree.
Now, coming up in early April, National Crime Victim Rights Week. If you could talk about what that week means and sort of some of the things that are going to be happening here in the city of Suffolk during that time period.
Sure. April 6th through April 12th is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, which is designated by our president, as a matter of fact. It is an opportunity for victim service agencies like Suffolk Victim Witness Services to provide an opportunity to educate their community about victim rights. It's an opportunity to remember those crime victims and witnesses in our city who have been impacted by crime. But also it's an opportunity for the community, it draws attention really for the community to kind of come together, and just like we are advocates for crime victims and witnesses as a part of our jobs, but as a community we can support victims and witnesses, and this just reminds everyone that anyone can become the victim of a crime. And it helps us to draw attention to that fact. And so what we're going to do for Victim Rights Week here in the city of Suffolk, beginning on April the 2nd, Mr. Ferguson and myself will be at the City Council meeting on April the 2nd, where Mayor Johnson is going to be presenting the proclamation for Victim Rights Week for the city of Suffolk. And then the week of April 6th through the 12th, we're inviting the community really to come to the Godwin Courts building beginning on that Monday, where we're going to have a memorial wreath which will be on display in the lobby of the courthouse, acknowledging those homicide victims that lost their lives tragically to crime here in the city of Suffolk last year. Unfortunately, we had 7 victims of crime here in the city of Suffolk, and so the wreath will be in memorial to them for that. The other thing that we're going to be doing this year is we're having what we're calling a clothesline T-shirt display. Okay. And that display is a visual reminder to us and the citizens of Suffolk that crime can occur at any age and to any person. And so what we're going to have is a clothesline with T-shirts on it identifying different types of crimes that people are impacted by as a visual reminder of that. And lastly, on Friday, April the 11th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., our office is going to be sponsoring a blood drive through the American Red Cross. Okay. We're inviting the community to come out and to give blood. We're calling it Give the Gift of Life. So many victims that we work with lose some blood as a result of violent crime. And so this is our opportunity to give blood and to give life. And so we're inviting the community to come out and to do that. Okay. And if they have any questions regarding any of the things that we're planning, they can certainly give me a call and I'll be more than happy to give them additional information.
Now, where's the blood drive going to be held?
The blood drive is actually going to be held in front of the courthouse here at the Gotham Courts building.
So I'm assuming there'll be the big blood bus, so to speak.
Yes.
That you can't miss it, so to speak.
You cannot miss it.
Even if you forget and you drive by, that's still an opportunity to take advantage of that situation.
And it'll be right in front of the building, so you cannot miss it.
Now, you mentioned, again, if someone's watching this program and whether they needed to know about the week that's set aside, or even just to find out generically about services and offerings, what is a good contact number that we can provide for people to pick up the phone and give you a call?
People can call me directly at 514-4373. Okay. That is my direct number. They can also call the main number for the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, which is 514-4365.
Okay. Well, Diane, thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And that will do it for this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We'll see you next time.